Hello, this is Arsen Kashian, head buyer of the Boulder Bookstore, and we're here for another edition of Inside the Boulder Bookstore. And I've got a very special guest today, Randy Hickernell. Randy was a rep to the Boulder Bookstore for a long time, going back into the 80s. He was my rep from 1997 when I started buying up until his retirement just last year. So Randy, welcome.
Thank you, Arsen. Nice to be here.
Yeah, so you had a career over 40 years as a sales rep, right, for publishers.
Yes.
So how did you get it? How did you get that job? I mean, you know, if you're not in the book industry, or even some of us in the book industry, it's like, how does somebody even become a sales rep? And how did you become a sales rep back in, what, 1980 or so?
1979.
79.
Well, I started working after college. I had no clue about what I was going to do. I had a good friend who was also in the book business who said he didn't go to college to get a job, he went to seek truth. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of what I was thinking. I wanted to become, you know, just learn and grow. And then I had no clue about what kind of job to get. And I had a friend who had worked in bookstores in high school, and he suggested I go. He said, "You like to read, why don't you go apply at bookstores?" So I did that in Seattle and got a job in 1976 as Christmas help at a bookstore. And then after 3 years working there, back then publishers were expanding their sales forces and hiring people, so I applied about 6 times, different companies, and finally got a job with Warner Books back then, which is now part of Hachette Book Group. But I worked for Warner, then Random House, and the paperback division, Ballantine.
Yeah, and that's well, it's funny, you started with Warner, and then the last 2 decades or so of your career was with Hachette, which was
yes,
at
I started
Warner.
there in 2001.
Yeah, so when I first started buying from you, you were with Ballantine.
Right.
And you were selling, there was mostly paperbacks, or all paperbacks at that point in time?
They did hardcover too, but mostly paperback.
Yeah, and what was Ballantine like? I mean, that type of publishing, to see a rep on its own for that kind of publisher doesn't happen anymore. You know, they're just folded into much bigger companies. But so what was it like working for Ballantine and kind of selling mostly paperbacks? So these are books that had probably previously been published as hardbacks.
Mostly. You know, one of their big imprints was Del Rey, the science fiction fantasy imprint that Judy Lynn Del Rey and Lester Del Rey founded. And Ian Ballantine was the original publisher at Ballantine Books, but it was then part of Random House, which was not part of Bertelsmann back then. But anyway, every month there would be a list of titles, usually about 25 titles, and stores would usually buy a display of the big title, and so it was in some ways more like magazine publishing, because every month there was a new list and you had to get it in, and usually they would only sell for a few months and then they would drop off the list.
So when you would come see me, we would maybe do 3 or 4 months at a time?
Usually 3, yeah.
Maybe 100 titles or so?
Yes, roughly.
I mean, now my reps sell me 800 titles at a time. Like, I have an appointment later today where it's 600 titles.
Yeah, I would often, like I would meet with you or whoever was buying at the time, and it would usually be maybe an hour or 2, but back then I would write the order out on an NCR pad of paper, and I'd fold it up and mail it into the company. And
so what do you think are the biggest changes you saw in publishing during those 40 plus years?
Probably consolidation, that many smaller publishers were bought by larger publishers, and then the change with computers as far as this within the bookstore and within the repping, where everything was done on computer instead of using print catalogs and paper to write up orders.
So how did the consolidation affect you as a rep? Like, you were early with Warner, then Ballantine with 25, 30 books a month. In the end, you were selling Hachette, and that was a publisher that had a lot of consolidation.
Yeah.
Like, they had bought a lot of stuff. So how did your job at the end feel different than your job at the beginning, I guess?
Well, it was more of a seasonal job rather than like a monthly catalog, and it was all done on computer, and then as far as the consolidation is when I changed. Like in 1999, I was laid off from my Ballantine book job because Bertelsmann purchased Random House and also owned Bantam, which was a large paperback publisher, and they they eliminated my position, so I was laid off, and then worked as a commission rep for 3 years, and then eventually got hired by, was Time Warner, then became Hachette. So,
so in all these years, what was a best-selling book that stood out to you? Like, what was the biggest book you feel like you sold?
Probably the Twilight books from Stephanie Meyer. Those were huge. They were a cultural phenomenon, and then the movies came out, and the books just kept selling and selling and selling. And
did you read them yourself?
I read Twilight.
Uh-huh.
I remember going to see the movie and thinking, I'm not sure this is a great movie, but it's really going to help sell the book.
Which is what you cared about.
Well, it was important, and my daughters loved Twilight. I mean, they've read all the books and really loved them, and it did have an impact, I think, on our culture. Did
you have a book that you thought when you went out to sell it, like, this is going to be a big book, and then it just didn't happen?
It was probably back when I was with Valentine, it was Roseanne Barr's memoir. And I can't remember the title. I know that the title changed because it was an expletive originally, and it was chosen not to use that.
Probably would have sold better.
Perhaps, but the book and the Roseanne Barr had personal issues, and which I'm sorry about, but the book did not succeed.
So, how did you deal with that type of thing? Like, if you had told all your bookstores, you got to load up on this book, and then you realize it's not working, how do you feel as a rep? Do you feel like, or it's a returnable business, so they're not stuck with them, but did you feel a little bad? Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have pushed so hard?
I felt bad. I felt like I had misled the buyer, and I also, I'm a human, I make mistakes. The company was saying, they spent a lot of money on it, and it could have potentially been a big bestseller. It wasn't. So, I mean, as a buyer, how do you feel when you buy something and you're not, and you feel like, oh, I thought this was going to be huge and it didn't sell?
Oh, they haunt me. Especially when you walk around the store and you see the physical manifestation of it, like there's 50 books and you've sold 3 of them,
Yeah.
We actually have a phrase at the store for that kind of book. We call it Bernanke, for Ben Bernanke, the Fed chairman, because his biography we bought like 100 copies of, and I think we sold 17. So that was like mounds of it. So now anytime a book seems to be trending in that way, we're like, oh no, it's a Bernanke. So what author, is there an author that you particularly liked working with, or that you really kind of felt like, this is great that I get to represent this person?
Well, there are many, but one that stands out to me is Michael Connelly, because I love his writing, his mystery novels, his character, the Lincoln lawyer character, and then also Harry Bosch. And he's just a really kind, gentle person, and just really cares about everybody he meets. Just really. It was an honor to represent him, and many other authors like Malcolm Gladwell, David Sedaris.
Yeah, you had some great authors, and I remember going to dinner with Malcolm Gladwell, or maybe I was down in Denver, and it was kind of fun after when Tipping Point came out, and there was all sorts of great experiences. As a rep, you get to have meeting these authors. Now that you're retired, is there anything that you miss about the business, or are you just like, 40 years, man, I'm out?
No, I miss seeing people like you and calling on stores throughout I covered different areas of the country, based here in Denver, but also went to Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri. Went to Oregon for a while, to Powell's in Portland, and so I miss seeing people, and that's really still the heart of the business. So many things have changed, but it's really the interactions between people that is the core of what makes publishing a great business to be in, and book selling. So what are you reading in your retirement, now that you're not trying to read your list every season? Right now I'm reading a novel that's really challenging, Mean Spirit. It's Linda Hogan's novel about the Oklahoma the native people who were swindled by guardians during the oil rush in Oklahoma. And Killers of the Flower Moon is that story, but Linda Hogan wrote this book about 30 years ago, and it's still in print, and it's a powerful novel, and she's a native person. And it did win the Colorado Book Award one of the awards back in 1991, I believe. So that's what I'm reading right now, and it is challenging to read, but I'm committed to reading it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today,
Yes,
Randy.
my pleasure, Arsen. It's been great knowing you, and I hope we can keep going to baseball games and
Definitely.
being friends. So
That'd be wonderful.
yeah, and support your local independent.
All right, thank you for watching our YouTube channel, and if you like this video, please subscribe.